Is Russia preparing to declare full-fledged war on Ukraine? And will announce total mobilize or not? Let's talk a little about whether the mobilization in Russia is preparing for the march of the occupiers in Ukraine. Now let's analyze the indirect signs that can be used to understand whether mobilization is being prepared in Russia. First, Russia clearly invaded Ukraine to defeat. So, how do you imagine this moment? The moment of defeat. One day, some of the highest echelons of power in Russia will come out and say that they say everything, Russia has lost and is leaving Ukraine. When did Russia even admit its defeat? Something like that is not remembered. The fact is that Russia has fallen into a trap in Ukraine. Ukraine's armed forces do not allow it to win. And she cannot leave Ukraine with a defeat. Because cults rule in Russia. The cult of war now reigns in the country. How is it even possible that the Russians admit defeat? Their country is the biggest and strongest in quotes. That thinking most of Russians. Not all, but many. So, it is simply impossible to imagine. Therefore, most likely, Russia will, so to speak, will break forward. In spite of everything, an obvious or implicit defeat. A country that does not recognize defeat simply cannot do otherwise. Remember Hitler. Even when Berlin could no longer resist, it could not accept it until the last moment. He did the same thing he did to himself. Because he never accepted the situation in which his brainchild, Hitler's Germany, found itself. And if many people living in the country think so? Imagine that. Is there a way out of this situation in Russia? Yes, but it looks quite unrealistic. A meager chance, but it is. Russia has a way out of this situation so as not to bring the situation to an end. It is a reset of government and a change of government. When the head of Russia formally finds a successor and withdraws troops from Ukraine, Russia is in fact admitting defeat, as it has not been able to compete with Ukraine. And will ask to lift sanctions. And in this situation, Russia may exist for an infinite amount of time. There will be no democracy, but Russia will live, as they say, in its own juice, but it will be a relatively safe country for neighboring countries. But will the Russian leadership go for such a scenario? Very unlikely. Second, if we imagine that Russia will not be thinking about defeated in Ukraine, then mobilization is a logical step for Russia. Russia can mobilize until May 9. It will be difficult to hold a parade as such because there is no optimistic note for it. Will Russia remember 1945 again and talk about it again? Unlikely. She needs new victories. And if there is nothing to brag about, then Russia can announce mobilization or initiate such a step. Why talk about it? To prepare for this likely event. If Ukraine prepares for this step will not help Russia. Mobilization will not solve Russia's problems. Lack of military equipment, lack of money in the economy, the problem of production within the country. And the sooner Russia realizes that it is lost and there is no way to change it and withdraw troops from Ukraine, then better for Ukrainians. If this happens, the civilian population in Ukraine will suffer the least. If Russia follows the current path, it will inevitably come to mobilization. Question: when? On or after the 9th of May?